Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Last time in the end of the lecture, I discussed about the grey matter or cerebellum cortex, its structure. Today about the white matter in the cerebellum. Large quantity of white matter is present in the cerebellar hemisphere. So large quantity of white matter is present in the cerebellar hemisphere, or small quantity is present in the vermis of the cerebellum. The white matter contains three types of fibers. So three types of nerve fibers are present in the white matter: intrinsic, afferent, and efferent. Intrinsic, afferent, and efferent. Intrinsic nerve fibers remain within the cerebellum. So intrinsic nerve fibers remain within the cerebellum. These pass from cerebellar cortex to vermis. These pass from cerebellar cortex to vermis. All these pass from one cerebellar hemisphere to the other cerebellar hemisphere. So all these pass from one cerebellar hemisphere to the other cerebellar hemisphere. So these are the intrinsic nerve fibers in the cerebellum. Now the afferent nerve fibers. Afferent nerve fibers enter the cerebellum through middle cerebellar peduncle. Afferent nerve fibers enter into cerebellum through middle cerebellar peduncle. There are two types of afferent nerve fibers. Climbing fibers and mossy fibers. So these are the climbing fibers. These climbing fibers are from inferior olivary nucleus. These are from the inferior olivary nucleus climbing fibers, which come from the inferior olivary nucleus. Other afferent fibers are mossy fibers. So mossy fibers are the afferent fibers other than the climbing fibers. So mossy fibers are all the other fibers other than the climbing fibers. So these two types of afferent fibers enter the cerebellum through the inferior to the middle cerebellar peduncle. Now the efferent fibers from cerebellum, they start as the axon of the Purkinje fibers. You see the Purkinje cell? So they start as the axon of the Purkinje cells. Most of these fibers synapse with deep nucleus cells. So most of these nerve fibers synapse with deep nucleus cells. You know the four nuclear masses in the white matter of the cerebellar hemisphere: dentate, emboliform, globose, and fastidium. So most of the Purkinje cell fibers synapse with the deep nucleus cell. Some of these fibers may bypass the deep nucleus cells to go to the vestibular nucleus. But mostly the Purkinje cell fibers, which start as the efferent fibers, and the synapse into the deep nucleus cells. The axons of the deep nucleus cells, these are the efferents from the cerebellum. So these efferent fibers from deep nucleus cells, these come out of the cerebellum through the superior peduncle and inferior cerebellar peduncle. The efferent fibers come out from the cerebellum through the superior cerebellar peduncle and inferior cerebellar peduncle. Nerve fibers from the dentate and boliform globose, these come out through the superior cerebellar peduncle. So from these three nuclei, dentate and boliform globose, the nerve fibers come out through the superior cerebellar peduncle. And nerve fibers from the fastigial nucleus, these come out through the inferior cerebellar peduncle. These come out through the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So keep in mind that the afferent fibers enter the cerebellum through the middle cerebellar peduncle, while the efferent fibers come out of cerebellum through the superior and inferior cerebellar peduncle. So this was about the white matter of the cerebellum. In the cerebellum, there are $30 million functional units. So there are 30 million functional units in the cerebellum. And what is a functional unit? It consists of a single Purkinje cell and a nucleus cell or deep nucleus cell. So there are 30 million functional units in the cerebellum. Each is composed of a Purkinje cell and a deep nucleus cell. So a Purkinje cell and a deep nucleus cell constitute the functional unit. Now I discuss about the neuronal circuit in the cerebellum, right? And keep in mind there are 30 million functional units in the cerebellum. Each unit is composed of a Purkinje cell and a deep nuclear cell. Climbing fibers enter the cerebellum through these nerve fibers are from the inferior orbital nucleus. So climbing fibers enter cerebellum and these give collaterals to deep nucleus cells. So these give direct collaterals to deep nucleus cells. And through these collaterals, deep nucleus cells can be excited. So through these collaterals, deep nucleus cells can be excited. Then the climbing fibers, after giving collaterals to the deep nucleus cells, these pass to the molecular layer. These pass to the molecular layer where these climbing fibers synapse with the dendrites of the Purkinje cell. And these synapse with the dendrites of the Purkinje cell. So climbing fibers, after giving collaterals, direct collaterals to deep nucleus cells, these pass to the molecular layer where these climbing fibers synapse with the dendrites of the Purkinje cells. Mossy fibers are other efferent fibers. All the other efferent fibers other than the climbing, these are mossy fibers. Mossy fibers also give direct collaterals to deep nucleus cells. So mossy fibers also give direct collaterals to the deep nucleus cells, and through these collaterals, mossy fibers can excite the deep nucleus cells. So mossy fibers, after giving collaterals to deep nucleus cells, pass to the granular layer, right? Where these mossy fibers synapse with the dendrites of the granule cells. The synapse with the dendrites of the granule cells or granular cells. Right? You see, mossy fiber giving direct collateral to the deep nucleus cells, and these pass on to the granular cells and synapse with the dendrites of the granule cell. one climbing fiber can synapse with dendrites of 10 Purkinje cells. So one climbing fiber synapse with the dendrites of 10 Purkinje cells. While one mossy fiber can synapse with dendrites of hundreds of granule cells. So one mossy fiber can synapse with dendrites of hundreds of granule cells. I mentioned that deep nucleus cells can be excited through direct collaterals from climbing fibers and mossy fibers. So these direct collaterals from climbing fibers and mossy fibers, deep nucleus cells can be excited. Keep in mind that Purkinje cell is inhibitory to deep nucleus cells. So deep nucleus cells can be inhibited through Purkinje cell. So if you want to inhibit the Purkinje cell, it can be only inhibited through Purkinje cell. And deep nucleus cells can be excited through direct collaterals from the climbing fibers and mossy fibers. You know, in the cerebellum, there are stellate cells and basket cells. So stellate cells and basket cells are also present in the cerebellum. Stellate cells and basket cells cause lateral inhibition of the Purkinje cell. Right? So keep in mind, the stellate cells and basket cells can cause lateral inhibition of the Purkinje cell. Now, if we want to excite deep nucleus cells, Purkinje cell should be inhibited, must be inhibited. And how can we inhibit the Purkinje cell? Through the stellate cells and basket cells. So stellate cells and basket cells cause lateral inhibition of the Purkinje cell. So once Purkinje cells are inhibited, then the deep nucleus cells can be excited. In addition, the granule cells and Golgi cells are also inhibitory. The Golgi cells and granule cells are also inhibitory. You see, this is the granule cell, basket cell, stellate cell. Basket cell and stellate cell are inhibitory to granule cell and to the Purkinje cell. So basket cell and stellate cell are inhibitory to Purkinje cell. If we want to excite the deep nucleus cell, Purkinje cells should be inhibited. Or inhibited through basket cells and stellate cells. Then we can excite the deep nucleus cell. Granule cells, you see, Golgi cells, these inhibit the basket cell and the stellate cell. Right? So Golgi cells and granule cells can inhibit the basket cell and the stellate cell. So if we want to excite the deep nucleus cells, Purkinje cell must be inhibited. How can we inhibit this Purkinje cell? Through the basket cell and the stellate cell. Now, if you want to inhibit the Purkinje cell, right, that is through basket cell and the stellate cell. if you want to stimulate the Purkinje cell to inhibit the deep nuclear cell, then through Golgi cell and granule cell, the basket cells and stellate cells are inhibited. No inhibition on the Purkinje cell. And this leads to the inhibition of the deep nuclear cells. So when deep nuclear cell is to be inhibited, Purkinje cell should be excited. How excited? By inhibiting the basket cell and the stellate cell. How can these be inhibited? Through the granule cells and the Golgi cells. This is the neuronal circuit in the cerebellum. Again I repeat, if we want to excite the deep nuclear cell, it will be through the climbing fibers and muscle fibers, direct to that cell. When deep nuclear cells are to be excited, Purkinje cell should be inhibited. How can inhibit the Purkinje cell? By inhibiting by stimulating the basket cell and Purkinje the stellate cell. These can inhibit the Purkinje cell. When this cell is inhibited, then there is the excitation of the deep nuclear cells. If we want to inhibit the deep nuclear cell, Purkinje cell should be excited, and that can be excited by inhibiting the basket cell and the stellate cell. These two can be stimulated by inhibiting this through the granule cells and the Golgi cells. This is the neuronal circuit in the cerebellum which operates to carry out the functions. Deep nuclear cells and Purkinje cells will constitute the functional units. Right? These discharge impulses, even at rest, at the rate of about say 50 to 100 impulses per second. So Purkinje cell and the deep nuclear cells discharge impulses even at rest at the rate of 50 to 100 impulses per second. The typical function of the cerebellum is to produce synergism, and that is at the start of the movement. At the start of the movement, cerebellum controls the timing of turn-on signals to agonists and simultaneous turn-off signals to the antagonists. So typical function of cerebellum is to control the timing of turn-on signals to the agonists and simultaneous turn-off signals to the antagonists, that is at the start of the movement. Then at the end of the movement, its function is to control the timing of turn-off signal to agonists, turn-off signal to agonists, and simultaneous turn-on signal to the antagonists. At the end of the movement, it controls the turn-off signals to the agonists and simultaneous turn-on signals to the antagonists. I repeat that the typical function of cerebellum is to control the timing of turn-on signals to the agonists and simultaneous turn-off signals to the antagonists. This is at the start of the movement. At the end of the movement, it controls the timing of turn-off signals to the agonists and simultaneous turn-on signals to the antagonists, that is at the end of the movement. Now about the connections of the cerebellum. Cerebellum is connected to the brain through three peduncles bundles of nerve fibers or peduncles on each side. So on each side, it is connected to parts of the brain through these three peduncles: inferior cerebellar peduncle, middle cerebellar peduncle, and then the superior cerebellar peduncle. So inferior peduncle, cerebellar peduncle, middle cerebellar peduncle, and then the superior cerebellar peduncle. What are the nerve fibers in the inferior cerebellar peduncle? Inferior cerebellar peduncle. Posterior spinocerebellar tract. Posterior spinocerebellar tract. These are the afferent nerve fibers in the inferior cerebellar peduncle, and these include the posterior spinocerebellar tract. Then cuneo-cerebellar tract. Cuneo-cerebellar tract from the nucleus cuneatus to cerebellum. From nucleus cuneatus to cerebellum is the cuneo-cerebellar tract, also called external arcuate fibers. External arcuate fibers. Posterior external arcuate fibers or cuneo-cerebellar fibers or tract. Next is reticulocerebellar tract. Reticulocerebellar tract, and that is from the reticular formation to cerebellum. From reticular formation to cerebellum. Then is the olivocerebellar tract. Olivocerebellar tract. So these afferent fibers are from the inferior olivary nucleus. So these afferent fibers are from the inferior olivary nucleus, and these are the olivocerebellar tract. And then vestibulocerebellar tract. Vestibulocerebellar tract from vestibular nuclei to cerebellum. From vestibular nuclei to cerebellum. So there are five afferent fibers, 5 types of afferent fibers in the inferior cerebellar peduncle, posterior spinocerebellar, cuneo-cerebellar, reticulocerebellar, olivocerebellar, and vestibulocerebellar. Now about the efferents in the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Efferent nerve fibers in the inferior cerebellar peduncle. These include cerebellovestibular, and then cerebello-reticular. Cerebellovestibular and cerebello-reticular tracts, these are the efferent tracts in the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So this was about the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Now we can come to the middle cerebellar peduncle, which connects the cerebellum with the pons. Keep in mind that the inferior peduncle connects cerebellum with the medulla oblongata. Inferior peduncle, it connects the cerebellum with the medulla oblongata, and middle cerebellar peduncle connects the cerebellum with the pons. This is the largest of the peduncles. So middle cerebellar peduncle is the largest of the peduncles, which connects cerebellum with the pons. It contains pontocerebellar nerve fiber. It contains pontocerebellar nerve fibers, which arise from pontine nuclei, cross over to enter the middle cerebellar peduncle to go to the cerebellum. So these are the pontocerebellar fibers, which arise from the pontine nuclei, cross over to the opposite side to go to the cerebellum. So these pontocerebellar fibers are the part of cortico-pontocerebellar pathway. It is the part of cortico-pontocerebellar pathway. So this was about the middle cerebellar peduncle. Next, the superior cerebellar peduncle. It connects cerebellum with the midbrain. So superior peduncle connects cerebellum with the midbrain, What are the afferents in the superior peduncle? So the afferents in superior peduncles include tectocerebellum, rubrocerebellum. So tectocerebellum is from the tectum of midbrain to cerebellum. Rubrocerebellum from the red nucleus to the cerebellum. From the red nucleus to cerebellum is the rubrocerebellar tract. And third afferent is the anterior spinocerebellar tract. Anterior spinocerebellar tract. So three afferents in the superior peduncle: anterior spinocerebellar tract, tectocerebellar tract, and then rubrocerebellar tract. So these are the afferents in the superior peduncle. What are the efferents? Efferent fibers come out of the superior peduncle, and these go to the ventro-anterior and ventrolateral thalamic nuclei, and then to cerebral cortex. Right? So keep in mind that the efferent fibers coming out of the superior peduncle go to the ventro-anterior and ventrolateral thalamic nuclei, and then to the cerebral cortex. Some of the fibers go to the red nucleus, and then to the thalamic nuclei, ventro-anterior and ventrolateral thalamic nuclei, and then to cerebral cortex. So some nerve fibers coming out of the superior peduncle go to red nucleus, then to thalamic nuclei, and then to the cerebral cortex. Some of the efferent fibers go to the basal ganglia. So some of the efferent fibers go to the basal ganglia. So efferents from the superior cerebral peduncle, these go to the thalamic nuclei, ventro-anterior, ventrolateral thalamic nuclei, then to cerebral cortex. Other efferents from superior peduncle go to the red nucleus, then to thalamic nuclei, ventro-anterior, ventrolateral thalamic nuclei, then to cerebral cortex. And some of the efferents from superior peduncle, these go to the basal ganglia. So this was about the connections of the cerebellum. Next we discuss about the functions of the cerebellum. Now first about functions of the lateral zone. Lateral zone of cerebellum is also called cerebellum because of its connections with the motor association areas. So lateral zone of cerebellum is also called cerebrocerebellum because of its connections with the motor association areas in the cerebral cortex. It is called cerebrocerebellum. Its function is planning and programming of the sequential movements. Movements which come in sequence. So planning and programming of the sequential movements. What is the sequence of the movements? What will be the timing of each movement? Right? So lateral zone causes smooth progression of one movement to the other, and so on. Cerebellum controls the smooth progression of one movement to the other, next to the other, and so on. So this is the control of planning of the sequential movements, the movements which come in sequence, and it causes smooth progression of one movement to the other. So it will control the sequence and also the timing of the movements. Its other function is the lateral zone has got extra motor predictive function. It has extra motor predictive function. It can predict before time that how long a movement will be. It predicts before time that how long a movement will be. I want to reach this object. I can move this object and stop before reaching this object. I will not strike with this object. This is the extra motor predictive function that it helps to decide how long the movement will be or how rapidly the man is approaching towards the object. How rapidly the man is approaching towards the object. How rapidly the man is approaching towards the object. This is the extra motor predictive function. So this was about the lateral zone. Now about the intermediate zone. Intermediate zone. It is also called spinocerebellum. Also called spinocerebellum. Spinocerebellum, it acts as a comparator. It acts as a comparator. It compares the intended plan of movement with actual